Terrific. Really, thank you very much. Well, welcome everyone, and again, Jim D'Antoni, Director of Sales at Dish Media. That's both Dish TV as well as Sling TV. Shameless 30 seconds here. We offer data-driven television solutions to the marketplace, most notably addressable advertising. When we sell addressable, we sell it across both Dish and Sling through our deal with ComScore. We're seeing a lot of activity in verticals such as pharma, auto, retail, travel, among others. But we also have a best-in-class Sling programmatic platform that is have been out there and established in the marketplace as a market leader for a couple of years. So I've been participating in Brand Innovators events for about 4 years. I always find them insightful. I think it's a great atmosphere that they've created, and it's always worth a listen. I'm sure today will be very much in line with that. So I'm thrilled to be here. Enough about me. I want to just quickly welcome Adam. Adam has been at J&J for about a year, and we'll let him introduce himself a little more properly in a bit. But and prior to that, he had spent a little stint at Hewlett Packard, and I did a little LinkedIn stalking, and it looks like you started your career on the agency side, which is great. So welcome, Adam.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate the intro, and I think you did a decent starting point there. Like you said, I've been with J&J for the past year now. I lead the global media capabilities and operations group, which sits within a larger consumer experience org, or CXO for short, as we refer to it. And ultimately, this latest consumer org within J&J Consumer Health is responsible for from media to brand and content, brand excellence, ad and martech, all of the kind of foundational pieces that support the full consumer journey, and e-com, all of the kind of extensions of where that over the last few years where that experience has grown. So a bit of a new team within the media org, at least. I kind of twofold responsibility. The global media org supports all of the global partnerships. So our core media partners, our global agency relationships, we partner with IPG and the J3 team as the primary group within IPG. And then a newer part of the remit, hence a lot of the hiring within my team over the last year has been to also support the org in a bit more of a specialized capability, brought on leads for programmatic, search, social, commerce media, kind of representing all of the core media channels to really support our region, support our markets and brands with what the next wave of innovation and capability development needs to be within those functions, and where we can support from a central standpoint.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating and exciting. I think you have played a role in creating the Center of Excellence that wasn't there. You helped build that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I can't take full credit for it. The idea for this latest reorg predated my joining, and hence when I joined the team, some of the vision for that had already been established. But since then, like I mentioned, pretty much with a few exceptions of legacy team members, the entire almost the entirety of this team is either new to J&J, a lot of external hires, but also some internal transfers into this new org too. Really, I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think the one key point has been J&J Consumer Health just has had a desire for our marketers, our brand teams, to get more invested in the day-to-day operations, the day-to-day governance of our media activity. And in order to do that, we needed to build out a more of a central center of excellence team to support the region, support the markets, and what for programmatic, as an example, what does the next phase of capability development need to look like? What do we need to be thinking about internally at J&J on governing our programmatic investment? What should our brand teams be directly involved in from an optimization standpoint? So kind of building out that roadmap from a not just a resourcing standpoint, but what does that best practice governance look like? Not to mention all of the just capability developments that our team can be at the forefront of the industry to make sure that we're bringing to the to the inside of the org.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's just fascinating how much the media marketplace has changed. Just, it was changing, that way prior to COVID, and it's accelerating in such a great length. So you have all that going on. Oh, and let's throw a corporate reorg on top of that, and so because you talked about J&J being decentralized, if you will, and this helps you kind of just map out to the different portions of the company that you need to touch base, and collaborate with.
Yeah, that's right. And for anyone on the line who hadn't heard the announcement, which came out towards the end of 21, J&J, in the next year, sometime during 23, will be the consumer health group, which is the predominant group that I represent within J&J, will be spinning off into its own publicly traded company. So all of the separation activities and planning activities for that obviously have become a big focus for what we intend to bring into the new consumer health organization. But definitely an exciting time to be here to take the best of what J&J has built out, and also have the opportunity to redefine a bit what does this mean for more of a CPG specific organization in the future.
Sure. Okay, great. That's I don't know if there's anything else you want to add about the company or your team. If not, we can jump into some of the meat. But
let's jump in.
Okay, yeah, we're going to cover a number of subjects. Of course, preparing for a cookieless world. We're going to get into media mix modeling, balancing that balance of that migration of linear revenue to CTV. How do you balance that? How do you make sure that has worked and is still working and acts and affects the larger whole? So we had a really good prep session, and it seems like we've been preparing for a cookieless world for quite some time now as an industry, but it's coming obviously. And so I know you've been doing a number of tests. You've been doing some clean room testing. We'd love to get into some of that, and any other testing you're doing. We can those are a number of questions that I have. But why don't we start with these? You're just broadly, how are you preparing for a cookieless world at J&J?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, there's a lot within there that we have kind of broken out into some separate tracks at this point, and probably a lot of it very similar to where the rest of our peers are focusing their efforts. Yeah, I think for us, and again, given that I've been here for a year, obviously there was prep work that happened beforehand, but the way that we've tried to define it is, a first step, from a global standpoint at least, is advising our each of the markets based on their individual tech stacks, media investment strategies, what percent, roughly speaking, of their investment is at risk in the future, based on the expected third-party cookie deprecation, just to have a baseline on what some of the most immediate opportunities were to focus our efforts, and depending on what stack each market has adopted, where we would recommend them to fast track some testing to move to platforms that we see as less at risk. Or obviously everything has a risk component at this point. So kind of build out that baseline on where we're at on day one, and what we need to build out as a testing agenda to prep ourselves as much as possible. And within that testing agenda, obviously there's the broad topic of post third-party cookies. What are the other ID solutions that we have at our opportunity to test out now? Obviously, I think there is still a lot that needs to be proven out as far as how these new, what kind of adoption the new ID solutions will get, how consumers react to it. So our approach from an ID standpoint, obviously, has been to start with our existing strategic partners, many of which are the one, similar to the rest of the of the marketing org is, our existing stack obviously are at the forefront on defining what those new ID solutions are. So we're partnering with them to test them out, get some early insight on what kind of scale we're seeing, what some of the challenges are in executing non-cookie based media buying. But that's kind of one broad pillar. And then I think outside of that it's thinking about what our walled garden investment looks like. Obviously there's some, and with exceptions obviously, but there's some level of stability in what their future ecosystem could look like. And not to say that we're shifting investment at large into walled gardens, but thinking about, especially for smaller markets, smaller budget brands, potentially thinking about how many building blocks of media channels do they need to support their media programs, and thinking about a tiered approach of from most basic to most complex on what those options are for markets, in the worst case future that they lose an option from some of the third party based cookie tactics that they're using right now. For us, like I mentioned, from a consumer health standpoint within J&J, obviously we have a huge roadmap with our retail partners, with the evolving retail media landscape, and thinking about not just retailers, but the entirety of the second party data ecosystem that we know we will need to leverage. And there's a lot of exciting opportunity within the retail space to integrate those data sets, those measurement capabilities as another quote unquote future proofing idea of what might happen post third party. And then finally, obviously for what it makes sense for our brands from a first party consumer engagement standpoint, thinking about not just from a direct to consumer standpoint, but how are we just thinking about first party data acquisition? What does that consumer relationship look like for the future of a CPG organization? And both from a consumer engagement standpoint, but obviously what the resulting first party data collection and building out our CRM CDP programs to support that, small right now, but something that we expect to hope to grow and scale as another pillar of what that total future proofing ecosystem might look like.
Yeah. I think you mentioned second party data testing with retailers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think each retailer right now, I think, is a very different story on where they're at. Are they building out their own media activation platforms? Are they are they shifting from more managed service offerings to self-service offerings? Are they integrating with existing partners within our tech stack? Predominantly those retailers are thinking about not just their own platforms, but how to partner with, say, existing DSPs to leverage their data and their measurement solutions. So it's still, I wouldn't say it's disorganized, but each retailer is very much, coming with a different mindset on what they want their media offering to be. What do they want to own themselves? What are they willing to integrate into other, other third-party platforms? So we're really just building out that, even just that framework of how to evaluate different retailer offerings against each other. Put different, media budgets into market to test out their new capabilities. But with the evolution and hopefully long-term the convergence of retail media into the rest of what we're doing from a national standpoint, obviously we're not quite there yet, but that is the vision that we're driving towards, is a huge opportunity from a future-proofing standpoint, just knowing that obviously those data sets will continue to stay rich over time, and we see as a hugely important part of our future strategy, from not just from a data standpoint, but really from a integration of what had been separate siloed shopper media activations from the rest of our national campaign activity. So for a lot of reasons, not just from a future proofing standpoint, it is a huge area for investment in. Also, where we are trying to build our internal teams to be able to support that from a more direct standpoint than we have in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing the explosion over the last 18 months, 24 months in that space specifically. It's just and it's got really good attribution, and it's mostly a display programmatic kind of ecosystem, and but I think in sooner or later I think you're going to start to see video right. Go into that ecosystem. So, and that's a whole other, that's really as big as it is, and it's scaled up. It's really in its infancy when you really look at what it will become.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously they've built out great capabilities over the years, but the idea of how it's going to converge into the rest of the media ad tech stack and become a truly integrated component of what we execute on the media day in day out outside of say shopper specific investments, I think definitely in its infancy, and just a huge opportunity for I think all sides of the industry to build out that integration, and to your point, scale it to all as many media channels and formats as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to circle back to attribution and just TV attribution versus data attribution. They're two different animals. Obviously, one is newer and less sophisticated, that being television. Can you just give us some of your thoughts on just the difference? And when you're measuring, are you using partners to measure both, or do you have specialists in both of those areas, or a combination?
I would say it's more holistic at this point. I mean, of course, there's more specialized or specific measurement frameworks by channel, but by and large, I would say roughly, the majority of our media investment is held to an ROI outcome at the end of the day, and working with your typical MMM plus MTA partners to build out that stack, and different levels of different partners, different levels of frequency that we're getting that insight across markets. Obviously there's a spectrum there, but ultimately J&J has found that standard, even with its limitations, and of course there are limitations, that standard across media investments has been a reliable way to rationalize our investment and optimize across channels on a longer term cadence. But with that baseline, to the question of how we're say migrating from linear TV investments to CTV and newer channels where perhaps the measurement opportunity is a bit more limited at the moment. There's challenges there, and there's implications on how fast it allows us to move investments into newer channels. But with that said, I mean, of course, as everyone would say the same, we know where the consumers are going. We know where we do need to scale to. So we've been very invested, not just us, but IPG and the J3 teams have been a great partner in helping us push the measurement requirements in in TV, specifically in the spectrum of what we need to see from a CTV standpoint, so that we have that same basis to rationalize against CTV as we have had for quite a while in some of our digital investments. But with that said, that's not it's not necessarily slowing us down from making those budget shifts as we need to. But of course, with what we would hope to see from a measurement standpoint, and not just measurement from a pricing standpoint, there's discrepancies on what we can get from a linear standpoint that we can't get in CTV at this standpoint. There's many factors that are playing into it. Obviously, we have like a short list on what we would like to see change to fast track that investment growth even more than we're at the moment.
Got it. Good stuff. So in terms of, you mentioned another thing in our prep session, just, going back to desperately trying to find a solution for a cookieless, ecosystem, just to make sure that the trains are running time to prop your business so you don't lose momentum on your business, as instead of trying to improve that creative framework and the way you message to people to try to influence consumer behavior. I found that was very thoughtful, and I'd love you to just share a little of that with the group, the audience.
Yeah, I think it's not even just from my time at J&J, but prior to that, because obviously my last role we were starting with the prep work here as well, and just it's not to take away from the importance of everything I just spoke about, of like all the different pillars of how we need to future-proof the investment, and all the time that we're spending there is well justified. My soapbox, my concern for the industry is that it sometimes feels like we're spending all of our time talking about like, cookies are going away. What can we do to rebuild it to protect this ecosystem that we've built out over the last decade? And not enough time recognizing what this shift means on what consumers are asking for from brands and how they want to protect their data, and how they envision a future for privacy. And off of that, thinking about what is a meaningful way to communicate our message to those consumers. Again, obviously our brand teams are putting together thoughtful messaging plans and creative development plans. But from a media organization, from a media industry standpoint, I think we have a role in that as well, to not just build out the, what is the next ID solution that's going to continue the status quo for us, but can we invest as much conversation in building more engaging creative formats that, regardless of our targeting efficiencies, we're building out quality formats that are actually going to be a compelling way for a consumer to engage with us, and thinking about what the future of that looks like as well. I don't think we can defer that conversation to our creative and brand teams entirely. I think we have an important role there to think about what can we be doing better there. That, of course, we want to bring in the best of our targeting capabilities and measurement capabilities, but I think if we saw some of the issues we have from the formats that we're investing millions of dollars of budget in right now, the right way to get our consumers to engage with us or for them to respond to us, I think it's ultimately a missed opportunity if the industry is only focused on the former, which I think sometimes we're only focused on the former.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. All right, the other thing we didn't chat a lot about, but just it's interesting, and we're in, the upfronts are done now, but it's interesting, at least I find, last year, a lot of people got, 2 years ago, burned and scattered. People put money, almost oversubscribed last year as a whole, and it seems they've been, there's still a lot of money that was transacted, but they're holding some money back. Are you, do you hold some money back just for innovation? Do you look at, I don't want to, I don't want you to share anything, proprietary, quick on the spot, but just curious how the upfront continues to evolve. 2 years ago, everyone said the upfront's dead, and it's not, obviously, but it continues to morph. Streaming, is such a bigger part. Obviously, CTV is a big part of that. Just love to hear just some of your thoughts on the upfront overall.
Yeah, I think it's to what you said too. It's a bit of a combined hybrid approach. Of course, we have continuing the upfronts and thinking about how to get the efficiencies through that, but generally speaking, and not just for kind of TV investments, we always are, of course, to what I was saying around the importance of ROI to us, and investing in established, proven channels and tactics is important to us. We purposely want to be clear on like what % of the total investment should go towards those proven channels, and perhaps invest in the upfront as the basis for our linear TV planning, but be clear on what is that minority % investment that we encourage brands to hold back for purposeful testing, and whether it's new channels, new programs, new inventory, new tactics, that isn't proven to ROI potentially at all yet, so that we have a basis for fast tracking some of the investment changes that we know have to happen in the years to come, whether that's investing more in CTV or investing more in social properties that we're currently under leveraging at the moment. So it's both. We do have clear guidelines on what we think that percentage splits should be on proven investments versus unproven investments, but having a framework for how those unproven investments, what they need to prove out, what is the, from a global standpoint, having visibility across what all the markets are testing so that we can bring learnings across, and make sure that holistically we have the right tests in market, the right unproven tactics in market, so that we have that as a basis for bringing that over to some of the proven opportunities for the next year, 2 years out. So yeah, I think to what you were asking from a upfront standpoint, that obviously I think that plays into that mindset too, and we try to find that right balance between the two.
Yeah, yeah, and the other obvious thing that has changed the upfront is just the infusion of data as part of the conversation, part of the part of the transaction in many cases as well. But that's I think the upfront is here to stay, and it will no longer and personally I think data will continue to be a bigger part of that, and for all the right reasons from that standpoint. But I wanted to ask you again. This is something we didn't cover much of, but just you talked about how vast J&J is, and you've got this team of the Center of Excellence. How often are you dealing directly with brand managers? Individual brand. Is that if there's a launch, if you will, or is there an ongoing cadence to the conversations you have?
So it's a good question, and I think it's a model because our org has obviously changed quite a bit over this last year, not just my team, but across the regions, and how they've invested in more in-house talent to govern the investment. So it's a work in progress, and I think we're transparently finding what that right balance is. My global team, the broader global team, obviously are a few steps removed from the day-to-day of what the brand teams are executing. We have regional counterparts who help us bridge that gap between some of the global priorities and how what they're seeing from the local brands from an investment priority, capability priority standpoint. With that said, though, say we have a key initiative around. I'll throw out an example. We've spent a lot of the last year revising our approach to paid search and the framework behind that. We're being choiceful on which brands or which markets we're having that direct conversation with, based on the ones that we think are perhaps most eager or most ready, or has the biggest opportunity to implement that new framework. And in those kind of I would describe it more as a pilot case, not an always on conversation. We're bringing those specific capabilities to the local brands based on what we're hearing from our kind of regional counterparts who are helping organize all of that local input together. So it's a large org. There's a lot of kind of steps to that process, and I think we're definitely long-term looking to grow that direct engagement to not just build out these higher level ideas and capabilities, but actually see it through to practice. And there's more of that local integration that we know we need to get to off of this new structure. But that's roughly speaking how the from global to regional to local process is meant to work.
Great, thank you. I just want to circle back to media mix modeling. Just how often is the cadence of taking hard looks at it, or is that an ongoing kind of keep your finger on the pulse, or is that quarterly? And then when would you act to optimize on that? If you can give us some insight on that.
Yeah, it depends on the market. Not surprisingly, the U.S. has the most frequent, and would be having that conversation at the very least quarterly. Where possible, we've overlaid the primary MMM measurements with some MTA capability as well, which has the opportunity to be more frequent. For example, monthly. But the reality is some of our smaller markets don't have the budgets or the non-working budgets to support as frequent as ideally we would want to see. So it is a spectrum. I mean, regardless of if it's quarterly, half year, yearly, depending on the market, it of course is a slower cadence of how that is influencing planning and optimization decisions. So I would say the corollary to that conversation is how we've tried to build out more of a performance marketing, performance media measurement framework to support those longer term cadences as well. Where possible, proving out which more real-time KPIs we know will influence ROI outcomes, but to give the team something to have more of a regular basis of optimizing the investment and not just waiting for the MMM results to come back. So I think probably like any CPG, a similar story on obviously MMM as a source of truth to make the bigger investment shifts and the bigger planning decisions, but build out some of that operational optimization layer, which we haven't always had in the past, to make sure we're not losing track of what we can do on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis as well.
Got it. Thank you. You had mentioned J3 and IPG as your main agency partners and media partners. I mean, they're right up there in terms of the best in the business, in my opinion. They're the level of sophistication they bring to just the broader media ecosystem, but just from my specific purview, just their television investment team, Kinesso, they're just doing it right, and so you're, how often are you in contact with them weekly? And I assume you're dealing directly with J3
every day to some level, depending on the topic. Yeah, we have a great partnership with them that obviously well predates my time being here, given the legacy that we have with that team. Yeah, I think you mentioned their ability to help us push the TV ecosystem on measurement requirements, and where we see the need for that to advance each of those future proofing pillars that I walked through at the start of the call. They're very much a partner with us on defining what those mean. What is that maturity assessment that we take to each of the markets to evaluate what's at risk, what the most immediate needs are for each of the markets to address the planning work for the next couple of years. So yeah, we similar to our deep global, regional, local structure, they have a structure that very much mirrors that as well. So my team primarily is partnering with the global and our regional counterparts at J3 to see all parts of this agenda come into fruition. And definitely it's a deep collaboration. In some areas they're driving more, in some other areas J&J is taking the lead, but it's been a good balance of having their support along the way. And certainly on some any of the future facing requirements have been a critical resource to help keep us on top of the agenda as well. Yeah, no doubt. Good stuff. All right, and then we talked a little about this, just about leadership, in a hybrid, kind of world, or remote world. I mean, I mentioned to you that I've hired someone who worked with me a year, and they resigned, and I never met them face to face. Going back, in the earlier days of COVID, but it sounds like most people, the turnover is real across the board, whether you're on the sales side, agency side, client side. Turnover is a reality, and the ability to get someone who can do the job well, but they live in another time zone or another market. It's people are just grabbing at that, and it changes the dynamic. I love to sounds like, and it's also you had a little pre-COVID hybrids experience as well. But love to hear some of your thoughts on that. Yeah, definitely. I think there's clearly some mixed perspectives on where this will end up, but you mentioned prior to my time at J&J, I led global media for Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and well before COVID was a very dispersed organization. So even though obviously there were offices that every employee was going to, the cross-country, cross-globe collaboration ultimately made it very close to a virtual working environment, because you were very much were not just working with individuals in that one location. So I think I was still at that employer as the shift post-COVID happens, and it was probably as seamless of an experience there than probably more more companies felt during that disruption. So kind of that obviously has impacted that was new for me. When I was agency side, I was very much working with a New York based team with few exceptions. So that was a transition for me when I first made that that shift. But now coming into J&J, which, also dispersed, but a lot of central teams based in the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. I think we're figuring out as J&J what that means for us. But yeah, I think, based on different experiences coming into this, I think everyone is kind of taking a different approach on when are they, with offices reopening, when are we when are we asking teams to come together? When are we not asking teams to come together? How are we making hiring decisions? A few of the team members that I've brought on, I've purposely, had a broader recruiting strategy and, have team members across the country. Even, as we're potentially going back into the office and, the New York, New Jersey area. So not quite an answer to, I guess, like what the future of this looks like, but, for me personally, I've gotten used to that comfort level. And with that said, hoping to still, I think we need to find a good way to organize teams back into the office for either for full day working sessions or finding the right time to re-engage that part of the working model that we've lost, because clearly that's something that we all, maybe not all, but many of us want to bring back into the mix, even as we continue to appreciate the hybrid options that we have at the moment.
Yeah, it's striking that balance that you can connect and hopefully influence in a in-person way that you can't, and that's always supplemented by the majority of the conversation, or the relationship is still going to be over a screen, but it just helps to, I think it helps for culture. I think it helps on a number of reasons, So I think we have 2 minutes left here. So I wanted to see, I don't know if you have any predictions for either the back half of this year or even, 2023, just in terms of media overall.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll take it back to the main topic of today. Maybe it's based on all, I think you said at the start, the prepping for this future landscape has felt like a very long and delayed time frame. And based on how far we've seen partners get to at this point, I have to predict that it will continue to be delayed off of some of the latest timelines that we're thinking about. I think all of this prep work, regardless of when any of that deprecation actually happens, will be needed. But I still feel like we don't have I don't think the industry has a good sense on exactly when that cutoff date will be, that all of this new planning will take place over any of the cookie-based options. So not necessarily a second half prediction, but I predict that this will take longer than we even expect at this moment.
I actually second that prediction. It's just the way it is, but I think as long as we're making progress, slowly and surely, for improvement. And that's not the only area that needs improvement, but I think everyone is interested in finding solutions, whether that be cross-screen measurement across the board. But anyway, hi, Maddie. Are we done?
Hi, sorry. Yeah, we're just about at time, not to kick you guys off, but it was a great conversation. So thank you both so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.